Hey everyone, Carm Capriato, Remarkable Results Radio, and the Town Hall Academy. Oh, I'm excited about this show that we're going to do for you. But chatting with Matt Fanslow, let's bring him up with the rest of the gang. Matt, you have had some incredible episodes of late. That one that you did with Hunt was just off the charts. Just so many people listened to that and liked it. In fact, I think they said they want to hear more of Matt Fanslow talking to an accountant. Can you believe that?
I took a lot of advice where I talk less and let somebody else talk more, and it seemed to have worked perfectly.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Well, that's what happened
And
with
Hunt can talk.
and he can. That's what happened with you, Danner and Brian. You listened a lot.
Yeah, it's hard to get a word in edgewise. Plus, they're saying all this good stuff anyways.
Well, good to have you here, Matt Fanslow from the Matt Fanslow podcast, Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. We have Zack McClain with us. Hello, Zack.
Hey, Carm.
And John Rogers. Hey, John. JWR Automotive Diagnostics. Cool. Are you a mobile tech?
Yes.
Cool. Love that. Hey, look at I chatted with Matt and I said, look at I want to have a panel of technicians and I want to do one on our show because Matt's had guests on his show, and I just feel that so many of the shop owners that listen to this show could well deserve a discussion of some of our top techs in the industry. But before we go on, got to give some high praise to our great sponsors. Hey, does anyone really enjoy playing phone tag? Well, the callback will come back at exactly the worst time. Instead, share repair orders in any level of detail with Shopware's exclusive messenger platform with a live chat. Talk to my great friends at getshopware.com. And did you clean the fuel tank the last time you replaced a fuel pump? Well, contamination buildup in the tank not only impacts the vehicle's performance, but it can also damage the fuel pump. Clean the fuel tank in 5 minutes with Delphi Technologies Fuel Tank Cleaning Tool. Ask for it when you order a Delphi fuel pump in the future. Learn more at delphiaftermarket.com. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and thanks. So my role here is to kind of disappear and let Matt just chat with Zack and John, and we may have another joining us in just a little bit. And when he shows up, we will make sure he gets added to the group here. But Matt, thanks for bringing on Zack and John, and let's just talk shop.
That sounds like a blast. What do you want to talk about? I think John's got a really interesting position when you're going into shops and you kind of you get a nice outside looking in, but from a position of knowledge, like you kind of know about the repair process and of course the diagnostic process and technology. What's the first thing that kind of pops into your mind? It would be easy to pick on the shops you're going into providing a service. There's a reason they're calling you. They may not have certain pieces of equipment or whatever, but is there something a little outside of that you see that, I don't know, I guess you find somewhat fascinating that it still exists or that management ownership isn't making moves to address?
Well, I find that the evolution of the repair shop has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. When I first started my mobile business about 15 years ago, it was the typical prototype shop where you had a shop owner who ran the front, at service counter, and then you usually had one A guy or B guy that really was usually a very learned guy that definitely had his wits about him and definitely had some diagnostic ability. Then he had a couple of B guys and maybe a lube technician. And over the course of, the 15, 20 years here, what I've noticed here is a lot of shops have gone the way of having gone away from an A tech and a B tech, and now they have a myriad of C techs or lube guys. And what happens here is it's really, I guess the shop owner is looking for profitability, but I think it's really hurt in the technical aspect of it. From what I've seen over the last 15, 20 years, the dynamics of a shop have changed greatly.
Yeah, the heavy hitter showed up now.
Hey, hi, Sean. Welcome. Sean Hill
Sorry,
from the
guy.
Great White North.
Paul. How's everybody? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
That's
not at
okay,
all.
Sean. We're so glad to have you here. John, I got to stop you for a moment and ask you. I think you said something very powerful about the A's and the B's are going away to C's. Is it because we're not sending what we would feel are really good guys to training?
Well, I think what it is it's a whole shift. You have to remember that, as of the last time I read anything, I think it was a 70,000 manpower shortage of qualified technicians in the automotive industry, if I remember correctly. And a lot of guys are getting out of the business. You know what I mean? The business eats guys up. All right. So what happens here is shop owners will typically not want to pay a guy a good yearly salary when they can pay 5 guys to change parts. All right. And
Yeah.
it's a real issue in our industry. Don't get me wrong. There still are some great shops out there that have great technicians that, really hit the, put the arrow in the bullseye on diagnostics. And then I have to come in usually on those shops just because they don't have the proper equipment to program or they need a second opinion or something like that. But I definitely have seen and witnessed a shift in mentality of these shops. And really, when you come down to think about it, the average B guy, let's just put B, and I hate to put A, B, and C because I think that's a load of,
Yep.
That to me, that's just, I don't know. I don't agree with it, but I'm just going to use it as a prototypical moniker. Okay. But the average B guy in a shop, you got to think about his reading comprehension skills, his critical thinking skills. He's got to know geometry. He's got to know chemistry. He's got to know hydraulics. He's got to know this. He's got to know that. And when you add it all up at the end of the day, you have to get paid for what your knowledge is. And sometimes that it just doesn't equate in a shop environment. So I feel that lately what I've been seeing is that the shops have evolved, and instead of having 4 or 5 guys and you have 1 A guy, 1 B guy, and a couple of lube techs, it's like 5 C guys, and they're changing parts. And a lot of shops would rather have me come in and diagnose or program for them, and they feel that that's more profitable. I don't know. I'm not a shop owner, so I don't know what the dynamics are or their economics, but I'm just telling you what I see out in the field.
All right, you're on Long Island, and it may be a microcosm out there that is different than in other places. Do you believe those shops are going to make it, John? Or are you gonna help them make it because
I'm trying to help them make it, but the automotive business is a rough business, always has been. All right, and it's a sink or swim type of situation, and I hope they do make it. There are, don't get me wrong, there are certain shops that really have no business working on cars, and we've all seen that. But I really do hope that the aftermarket shops stay in business. And I hope that maybe there is a shift back. I believe in cycles. Everything is cyclic. All right. So maybe there will be a transition back into the old traditional method of having, the owner run the front counter and having an A guy and a couple of B guys. And, time will tell on that, of course, with the technology that's coming down the road with, EVs and hybrids and so forth and so on. A lot of the service work will probably be going away. So, you're going to need somebody that has, some intelligence, some wits about them to work on these EVs and to service them properly.
Matt, I promise I would stay in the background, but boy,
Oh no.
I am so sorry. We did an episode, Town Hall Academy 318. This is 321, so maybe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it was called Future Shop Sooner Than You Think. And Jake Sorensen was on, Chris Chesney and Derek Kaufman. Incredible episode. If you haven't listened, please. But Chris Chesney, and everyone knows Chris Chesney, he says, if you don't know how to read, you're going to be stuck. You guys agree?
Yes,
absolutely.
And it's
not Chat GPT is just going to read it to us. So
we're good. I see.
Yeah. And it's not just the point of reading. You have to be able to comprehend it. and you have to be able to explain it, and you have to be able to, the dynamics of it is pretty intricate. You know what I mean? When you go into a programming job on a vehicle, and you go into it without reading service information or having a plan of attack, sometimes you can really not come out on top. You know what I mean? As far as that, and at the end of the day, when you got to talk to that shop owner and say, listen, it failed the programming, and deep down in your heart that you were the reason behind the programming failure because you didn't read procedure or you did not do it properly. That's a rough go.
Yeah. Or how many Fords have you showed up to do solenoid flow values or whatever, and they've got it all installed and there's something over the stickers.
Yeah. I have most of my shops trained by now. But new shops, when I get that phone call for solenoid strategy or an 8L90 transmission on a late model General Motors, I tell them, hey, listen, I need the solenoid strategy sticker. I will put it on personally, or I need to see the transmission before it goes into the vehicle so I can get the reading off of, the ton number off of the 8L90. So that's something that I try to emphasize to them. Don't get me wrong. It happens all the time where I get calls and, oh, they didn't give me a sticker. I don't know what the sticker is. And I politely refuse, until they can get me a sticker, or if they want to take the pan back down and get the QR code off the valve body or the numbers off the valve body, that's fine, but it's double work. And 9 times out of 10, tell you the truth, Matt, most of the tranny shops ship it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, I've run into that. And if they would have read service information, they would have known that you need those numbers, and would have been prepared. Like, yeah, over time you wise up, like Ford PCMs. I know I'm maybe picking on Ford here, but not even just PCMs, but certain Ford modules, you're going to need an extra key.
Mm-hmm.
And we figure that out, and then you kind of remind them when they're calling you up, like, hey, can you get you in here to program a new PCM? Do you have 2 keys? But if they would read service information, you wouldn't have to do that. They would know about that. And in some cases, maybe even find out that, not trying to take work out of, out of our money out of our pockets by them being able to do the same thing. But if they'd have read service information, they may have found out that the scan tool they already have could have done the job without your involvement.
And I was wondering how receptive some of these shops are. Is it the same ones having the same problems after you told them what you need, or do they catch on pretty quickly?
Most shops have a bad case of amnesia. You
Yes.
tell them today, and if you tell them on Thursday, to forget everything that you told them by Friday.
Yeah. And like everything John said, Zach, what do you see from your perspective? Because you do a little bit of mobile, or are you moving primarily to mobile?
So I'm in my 10th year of being an automotive technician, so I'm probably nowhere close to any of the guys in this panel as far as experience. But what I've seen from being mobile, I'm fully mobile. I don't work for a shop at all anymore. I'm amazed by the amount of shops that don't even have service info. So they'll call me and say, hey, we just put a transmission in this. We think it needs programming. Okay. So then the interrogation phase begins. You need to say, what's the year, make, and model of the vehicle? Okay. GM, for example, what transmission do you have? And then you have to work your way through the service information to find out the missing pieces that they don't even know they're missing. So that's something that blows me away, and something that I'm amazed to see not in shops is either only one source of service info or no service info. And that's something that I see quite often. And it is a repeat thing. I have certain shops that do things by service info, and then I have shops that don't. And the ones that do have service info, they're typically the ones who I've trained and listen. And the other guys, they're the ones who don't. So
yeah. So
luck of the draw.
Yeah. My fear with that line of discussion is most of the people, shop owners, managers that are going to listen to this podcast regularly are just going to scoff because they're not that shop. The people listening to this podcast and most of the other ones, they have it. So we're almost preaching to the choir. But
yes,
that's their competition.
Yeah, but I think it definitely is something. Zach, really brought up some great points there as far as, let's just talk about trannies. All right. You get a call for a General Motors transmission programming on a 17 Tahoe. Now that could be a 6L series or an 8L series. You tell them, okay, fold down the glove box, take a look at the RPO codes. What's RPO codes? All right, just go to the M's. Is it an MYC, MYD, or an M5U? All right, and then they're like, how do you know this stuff off the top of your head? It's because if you immerse yourself in it, you know it. You know what I mean? So it's something like Zack brought up. It's critical that these shops have service information, and more importantly, use it. How many times, Matt? How many times have you seen? Back in the heyday of the Snap-on Modus, all right? How many guys would have a Snap-on Modus, be proud they have a Snap-on Modus, and then pull out the $89 code reader to read codes and use the Snap-on Modus as a doorstop?
Yep.
If you're not using a tool, you're not using it. You're not being effective. So same
or
thing
using
with service information.
Yeah, or using the Modus as a code puller, maybe slight scan tool, because to view data stream only at the most basic of levels, and then not even knowing that it had a fairly capable, in the day for sure, fairly capable 4-channel oscilloscope.
No doubt.
That never got used. Didn't even know it was there, even though there's a tab that says flat out lab scope, and then it will hold your hand on how to use it.
Here's something that just blows me away, and I hate to interrupt, but we were just talking about GMs, and newer GMs is where this is going to apply, but the aging of our workforce means that we still have a lot of technicians that are new to computer usages in terms of their lifetime, right? And on some newer GMs, there is no RPO label. There's a QR code.
Yep.
And if I'm talking to the shop owner who's most likely up there in age, or I'm talking to a technician sometimes, I say, hey, can you tell me the RPO codes like John mentioned? And they're like, where are the RPO codes? I'm like, well, do you see a QR code? What's a QR code?
Yep.
So now you're having to, educate the customer on the basic use of technology because they're so removed from it. They have a flip phone. I'm in rural Arkansas. So, I mean, it's not uncommon to see somebody that has a flip phone, and you have to talk them out like, hey man, do you have an iPhone? No. Does one of the guys in the shop have an iPhone? Yeah. Okay. Go grab his iPhone. And then you handhold, for lack of a better term, to even get the information you need to estimate the job, let alone get the service info and everything else. So
and I found the QR code sometimes is incomplete, and you have to either get the GM parts department to send you one or make use of Repair Link. I think a lot of shops don't know about Repair Link.
Yep.
And I think it's free for us to use. It's provided to us by the dealerships to help order parts. Maybe you guys know different, but I don't know. It sounds to me like it's kind of a service and portal provided to us by the dealers to help order more parts from them, and then of course do it online and not flood their phone lines. But Sean, up in Canada with all your licensing, you probably don't have any of these issues.
Probably the same or more.
What?
We still have the same problems. The licensing is it's nice to have. It's great. For myself, I wrote my journeyman's and passed my Red Seal exam. I think I was 22 years old. I had no business. Looking back now, I had no business being a journeyman or a licensed technician. I grew into that, I think, as I've aged. But I've talked to some people, and I really believe that there should be almost a hybrid system where I like that initial 4 years of school, or I went through ASAP, so I did have my a quick 2 years and I ran through it. But after that, I'm done. I technically never have to do any training ever again. And I don't agree with that. Where down south with you guys with your ASE testing, I know there's pros and cons. I don't want to maybe get into that in this discussion, but I do like the fact that you got to retest. I would love to take it and retest and just even keep up to date. So I think a hybrid model of your initial schooling and then your continuing education through some sort of system or forum or however you want to do it, or organization, I think would be a great idea. So
yeah, Harvey would talk about that a fair bit. His license that he had gotten 30 years prior was still good.
Yeah, and we never have to challenge it again, kind of thing. Or I mean, a lot of us here, obviously, we're passionate about the trade and training and ongoing training, but we don't have to. And I don't really agree with that. I think you should be keeping up to date. and showing that you can keep up to date. Because if you don't, even if you, let's say, fail a test or you don't pass a test or whatever, now you know what you need to work on and where you can improve. It's not a bad thing. It just makes you a better technician in the end.
I think this might be an interesting question. I don't, it interests me, so maybe it's horrible, but let's start with John. Outside looking in, and maybe you want to speak more generically than like targeting the shops you go to, but if you, even some of the shops that you don't regularly go to, maybe the quote unquote good shops that once in a while they just get their butt handed to them, or on the rare occurrence they've got a vehicle in there that they're not equipped for and really just don't want to make the investment because it would be rough for them to make the ROI on it. But if thinking about those shops, what is like the number one thing that pops in your head that could make a huge improvement to the shop or for the techs?
Atmosphere. Okay.
So Carm's screaming culture, but we got him muted.
All right. So my big thing is atmosphere. You know what I mean? It's is the atmosphere conducive to furthering your automotive knowledge? I think Sean brought up a great point about about it with testing and retesting, and it's not so bad to fail a test or know where your weak points are. I always equate everything to sports. Okay. I grew up playing a lot of sports, and when a coach gave you some real good feedback and he told you, hey, listen, John, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses. When you went back into the gym or you went back into the rink or whatever to work on stuff, you hardly ever, if you wanted to succeed, you hardly ever worked on your strengths. You wanted to work on your weaknesses.
Yeah. And you usually didn't find out about them until somebody beat you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's, baseball, you've never had trouble hitting the curve ever.
Right.
Till that one dude.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Who threw a sick 12-6 and
yeah.
you had
to
do something. You had to do something about it. And I think Sean brings up a good point. Failure is not a bad thing. Like I've always said, failure is a great motivator. All right. Absolutely. And when I fail, it motivates, the hell out of me to be better. A personal thing I'll just throw out there. I struggled for years with vacuum waveforms. All right. Struggled. I don't know. I just could not get till I beat myself senseless into making sure that I learned how they work and everything else. And now they're one of my strengths. Okay. So to me, the biggest thing that you can do as far as a shop owner or whatever is to induce a culture or an atmosphere. All right. That's conducive to learning. Have good lighting. All right. Have a clean office. All right. Be human to each other. Hey, Joe, I need this car pushed in, instead of, grunting and groaning. Hey, listen, if there's nothing going on, give the guys off 3 hours early on a Friday. You're going to get it back in spades. You know what I mean? As far as that, I think the atmosphere has to change. Provide training for them, or at least offer them training. You know what I mean? Not every not all training is great. Don't get me wrong, but I go to as much training as I can. And you know what? If I get 2 or 3 things out of it, it's worth it. You know what I mean? To me.
John, I got to stop you for a moment. And Matt, you were right. I'm sitting here begging at the bit to jump in on this thing where John says atmosphere, culture. You just said everything that's important to every top shop that's out there. Question. Here's my question to you. You're out, you're going to a lot of shops. Through social media, through texting, through coming up to you and say, hey, John, I know there's a better way to do this. Is there any shop that has atmosphere and culture and training that you could recommend? Now, I know you would never do it, but do you hear feedback from technicians who want to go to the next level?
Yes and no. The majority of to be quite honest with you, the majority of technicians out in the field right now, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, treat this job as a 9-to-5 job. My car runs. I get out at 5:00. I don't care about Mrs. Jones's car. That parasitic drain can wait. I don't really care about it. It's not going to eat me up. But I can tell you, and everybody in this room is shaking their head saying, yeah, we take everything personal. All right. And that's how you succeed in this business. You know, I'm not saying that my life is totally automotive, because it can't be, but I take things very personal, and I'm sure Zach and I'm sure Sean and I know Matt does. All right. When we get beat or we need to do something, or, you know, we feel that, you know, we're not doing the right thing, we take it very personal, and that's what drives us.
Yeah, I was kind of curious. Zach's, I think, quite a bit younger than us by at least like 5 years.
I'm a young person, very young. I'm 27. I'll be 28 next month.
Man, are you old?
I look a lot older than I really am, but
I
yeah.
was 27 once.
27, half my age.
But what's that younger perspective, and do you think you could speak to even younger yet? That similar question I posed to John when you're in those shops, and I'm not talking about maybe for lack of, kind of like John said with ABC techs, maybe the CD level shops, not those so much, but more like the ABs. They're pretty good. But when you're in there at your age and what you've seen, and trying to put yourself in one of those bays, what would be like the number one thing you could think of to say, you know what, if you guys started doing this, it would make a big difference?
So this might seem weird to some, but it's something I've drawn some parallels with in my life and my business, as well as my time spent in the field as a technician. And it would probably be how you treat your tech when something goes wrong. So say that tech is just cruising, they're turning a bunch of hours, and misdiagnosis occurs. They call a $1,500 module, and it ends up being a blown fuse. How many of us mobile guys, we show up, we find the blown fuse, right?
Or missing.
Well, missing fuse.
It's not even blown. It was missing.
That's another one. Absolutely. And I've personally witnessed and been on the receiving end of situations similar to this, where when I've showed up and, hey man, the fuse is missing, the owner goes ballistic. And as an owner now, owning my own business, I can understand the frustration and the anger, right? But when I was a technician and I did something wrong, and the boss's first instinct is to chew me out, that did nothing but breed animosity and apathy. And like John said, it's a 9 to 5. You know, I came into this industry chomping at the bit. I wanted to be the best technician there. I want to be the best. And then 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you've had enough of those blow ups from mistakes you've made. And you're like, I'm here, clocking in, do my job and leave. There's so much to learn from your failures. I mean, look at this whiteboard right here. This is my physics 2 homework I've been working on, because I'm also in school for my engineering degree. And it's been almost 10 years since I've been in college, and I'm struggling. I mean, I'm going to have to drop a calculus class because I'm missing those fundamental foundational pieces of knowledge that I had from Cal 1 and 2. And I'm having to turn that internal conversation away from, you stink, you should know this, to, man, it's been 10 years. What can we do to get better? What can we learn from this mistake, instead of beat myself up or beat the employee up? Or we need a culture or an environment of learning. And I hate to use the phrase or term nurturing, but nurturing those young technicians so that they don't grow to hate, but grow to love.
So powerful. Zach, you're going to school for physics, an engineering degree?
Electrical engineering, yeah.
So are you going to create the first flying car for us?
We'll see. Got to get the degree first. But
God, I hope so.
I would love to leverage my automotive knowledge in an engineering role. But again, that's another topic for another day.
And please come back when you get that, when you graduate, please. I was thinking of leadership and management, and you know, the way that some bosses treat their people. Now, if you made a mistake, a leader would come up and say, all right, Zach, all right, it's pretty bad. What'd you learn from this? I mean, putting it back on you instead of calling you, whale shit on the bottom of the ocean. You know, you couldn't be lower than that. And that's just the wrong way to lead. And at that point in time, If he was a manager, he would have probably told you what to do. If he was a leader, he would ask you what you will do again in the future.
Absolutely.
And this is what we do on our Business Acumen podcast. We teach, over and over again from the wisdom of people in the industry. And Matt, to your point that you said earlier, maybe the people that really need to hear this don't listen to this show.
Yeah,
But-
I think that happens a lot, unfortunately.
But
We end up-
maybe we get new people all the time
Yep.
that they discover this and they realize, oh my God, we've made a whole bunch of mistakes. Let's keep listening. Let's figure out what we need to know. Maybe this is one of those podcasts that people are going to bump into and say, yeah, it sounds like me.
the material's got to be out there because the ones that do know need to be able to share it to the ones that don't.
Exactly.
So we have to produce the material, and that's why I'm hoping is it works its way around.
Yeah.
So that they can hear that. And, again, I get Sean, I don't think they run into this issue because Canadians are so pleasant that the shop culture is probably the least of their problems. You probably have a Timmy's right in every shop.
Right beside. Yeah, right
Oh,
beside.
wow.
Right behind. Yeah.
Yeah. So coffee and donuts all day.
But Zach is right though, and I've seen exactly what he says too, because all it does is breed resentment, and then you lose your confidence. You see that happen, and you see people starting to hide mistakes and try to make excuses, and it doesn't help anybody. And like John had said earlier, is the culture of the atmosphere is such a big component these days, and it's something that we need to look more into and just become better at, I think, because a better atmosphere, you're there 8+ hours a day. It's a team. It's almost like a family, and that's a big deal. And as Carm was saying, you got to, how as a manager are you going to handle that? How are you going to help them? And that's what the whole failing part. Maybe you did throw a $1,500 module at it. Okay, how are we going to not have this happen again? Do you need more training? What can we do? And then the same aspect of how are you going to do this differently? But as long as you can have a conversation about that, that's the only way it's ever going to get better.
Yeah, the whole scenarios, with the making a mistake, makes me think of sometimes managers or management owners, be it just because of the position, of quote unquote power, or maybe even it's just an attitude. And maybe some classes you kind of get it too, where you kind of feel like you're a daycare provider or a parent, like a mom or a dad watching over the kids. And when you make a mistake, usually your parents, at least especially dads, I would say, sometimes can be pretty critical. And I think about that, like working at the implement with my dad and my grandpa. If I made a mistake, my dad would be pretty upset and kind of like, what were you thinking? And my grandpa would be more of the like, well, one time I did this, don't worry about it. Or don't tell him. But one time your dad did this. And I'm thinking like, sometimes that's the attitude you have to approach somebody with after they've made a mistake, especially when you can see or sense they're already upset and disappointed in themselves or frustrated with themselves, that it doesn't make one lick of sense to go pile on. But if you walk over more like grandpa and be like, yeah, did I ever tell you the time I put this Nissan PCM in? It was, $2,000. Didn't fix it. It's broken wire under the intake.
But
that happened to my grandpa too, with my grandpa too, Matt. I'll never forget that. But some people will accept, for example, grandpa's ease with you as it's okay, and you fail and you fail and you fail. Somewhere along the line, a good leader has to hold you accountable that you've learned something and that you're going to work really hard not to make that mistake again, which means you still need to be close to everyone as a leader, but you're influencing them to be better than what they are. You're not the man, you're not the doer, you're the leader. And if the individual who's receiving the leadership, if pixie dust, if you will, from you failed, what did I learn? What did you learn? And you have plans not to let that happen again. And you need to commit to that. If you just ignore it every time, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, it's not so much ignoring, but it's de-escalating the situation, that you don't immediately put somebody on the defensive, because once you put them on the defensive, it's done. You're not telling them anything.
Yeah,
even if you're trying to be educational and do the right thing by with accountability, it was better off to kind of first de-escalate, and it's like, I got your back right now, and then what do we take away from this? Or even the next day, like, hey, what, you had a chance to think about that, what would you do different?
Yeah. But to be fair to the shop owners too, you have to remember, our business is riddled with, guys in the shop that have drug issues, alcohol issues, court issues, and so many different facets of their lifestyle that kind of like pours into the shop environment, and maybe when this guy, the shop owner, I don't want to pile on the shop owners. That's what I'm saying is, maybe what this shop owner blowing up on his employee for making a $2,000, misjudgment of the diagnostics. It could be fueled by, Joe, who's a drug addict that's been in the bathroom 3 times in the last 2 hours. And this one didn't come in today because he's on a bender from, Saturday night. And, he's just at his wit's end. You know what I mean? So you don't know what fuels that. But in the end, I agree that, being negative and piling on does nothing for that person's, learning ability to learn from their mistake.
Yeah. And I was really thinking about the people you could tell that it bothers. There's others I can't sympathize with it. Or maybe the right word's empathize, where you've made a big mistake and it's just kind of like, stuff happens. And those are the ones like, yeah, I would come down on. Are you kidding?
Mm-hmm.
You can always
no pride.
Right. You always seem these the up and coming techs that are going to be great, or the ones that are great with you already, that if they make a mistake, there is nothing what you can say to them, because what's going through their head and how they're beating themselves up, because they take it, as John said, it's so personal. Myself, I take it so personal. I think a lot of top guys are like that. So it doesn't really matter what you could say, but to Matt's point, it's the ones that they don't care. They almost fluff it off. And yeah, I could see that. That's when you got to come down on them.
John said something, and I just want to revisit it. He talks about people that have problems with drugs, or people that have issues with attendance, things like that. Are we looking at a symptom, or are we looking at a problem? Like when we diagnose something, we may find a blown fuse. Is the fuse the problem, though? What allows people with those types of issues to stay in a shop? Why do we have that level of technician in a shop? Is it because the shop owner allows it? Is it because the labor pool? Like, is that not another thing to discuss? I'm not trying to derail the conversation.
No.
It brought it to my mind. Why is that allowed? Why is the expectation not higher?
I think the problem with the conversation is it's gigantic, and there's more people with substance use disorders than we really even know. And we probably all know people that are outright have issues, whether it's alcoholism or drug addiction or something of that nature. Even, adrenaline junkies, technically, drama. I think drama is a big thing nowadays. People are addicted to drama. It's so widespread. But there's also people that have these issues. We have no idea.
Yeah. Functional. They hide it.
We have no idea. And I think the reason they're kept is, like you said, the labor pool is so small. Who are you going to replace them with? Like, for the most part, they get the job done. And also empathy, right? You want to help them out.
I wasn't trying to sound heartless. That wasn't my intention.
Zach, to your point, I had one shop that obviously they had a real good technician, but the only thing is, though, this guy would bang in every Monday and every Friday. All right. And the owner put up with him because Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, this guy produced. He was a good worker, but he would bang in every Monday and Friday. And I asked I asked the shop owner, I said, why do you allow this? Because I said, because it kind of is like a cancer in the shop
There we
because
go.
it erodes everybody around it. Huh, well, this guy's banging in every Monday. This guy's banging in every Friday. Why can't I do that? And he told me, who else am I going to get? And I hear that time and time again, because the number one question when I go into a shop, well, I get two questions typically on a new shop is, what scan tool should I buy? And we won't even get into that. And do you know any good guys? And I said, well, when you say good guys, what do you mean? I said, do you want a good guy that's got a pill addiction? Do you want a good guy that's got a lot of court dates? Do you want a good guy that's an alcoholic? Do you want a good guy that, doesn't have any of those issues and everything else? Because most of those guys that are good, that don't have any of those issues, already found a home and they're, making a good living. You know what I mean? And for you to lure them out typically is going to be beyond the pay scale that the shop owner is going to want to pay.
John just broke the code. They're making a good living. And so there are some shops out there that are knowing how to make a profit so that they can pay people and give them a good living.
Yeah. It is. It's a monument, like Matt said, it's a giant, like industry-wide issue. And it starts really, in my opinion, it starts at the high school level, because for years, your high school guidance counselor was taking little Jimmy, who didn't do well in math and science and everything else. Let's put him into the Go and Motor program. All right. Because the guidance counselors, and for that matter, most of academia, are so far removed from what we go through on a daily basis and don't have the understanding.
Yep.
We are a business only second to the medical community.
Yeah.
That has the changing. So
we had a advisory board meeting yesterday at the college that I'm a part of, and the discussion about what you just said, John, came up. Let's send Johnny to what we call it the BOCES, where the skilled trades are taught. There's one particular, there's about 3 centers here in our area that they bus them over, and the tide is changing, and the college principals and deans are recognizing that they have to embrace what we do. We are the most important skilled trades in this college amongst everything, welding and mechanical and nursing and all. We're the number one that they're paying attention to, because we need space, we need to grow. And that word through the superintendents of these skilled trade centers and all the way down are starting to knock the principals upside the head and say, you can't send Johnny, they're failing out of this stuff. They don't get it. They don't know. You cannot send them. You have to learn how to deal with that. I think who said it? That the tides are changing. Which way? John, was it you who said that tides will change? And I do believe that we are going to see, I think it's going to take another 5 years to see the entry level students that are going to high school, auto tech, and into college. There's going to be a lot more than we ever had. But we as shop owners, we as technicians need to go out and tell the world we're a high-tech industry, a skilled but yet high-tech industry. And there's great opportunity here. But the places you're describing, no one would want to work there.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other skilled trades are, again, going to beat us to the punch. We got to get our act together, because the electrician companies, the plumbers, HVAC, construction, they're at the high schools. They're talking to the parents.
Yes, they are.
Talking about if you get into our profession, you don't have to worry about a big 4-year degree, and not so much the degree itself, but the cost. And you can be earning X amount of dollars, a quote unquote really good living, while these other guys are still going, other people are still going to school.
Yeah.
And you're going to be making money. You won't have this overhead, and this job's not getting replaced. If they go into, one of these other, I don't want to pick on any particular program, I guess, but we all know there's certain programs that are in danger of, you graduate with your degree and either there is no job available, there's very, very few jobs available, or it's going to be replaced by automation or artificial intelligence. That's not going to happen to us. And so we as a profession have to get our act together and show up at the same time, or a different time, of course, but show up to talk to these parents, talk to these young people about, hey, you're guaranteed a job. Like, if you start showing some competency at this, you can write your ticket. You want to go work somewhere nice and warm? Done. Sean, you're sick of Canada? Boom, you're going to have a job before the plane lands. How many other professions have that? It's not that many.
So it's our reputation, guys. And what I've heard from John and Sean and Zach doesn't seem to want to help our reputation out based on what you're hearing in the shops that you're going to. C-Techs, GSs, and I don't need anybody else. John, I'll call you. Nobody wants to work here. I can't find anybody. I'll show you thousands of guys that I know of that people want to go to work at. They want to go to work there because they've done everything. Who said it? Was it you, Zach, about the atmosphere and the culture? I mean, or maybe it was you, John. Our reputation is at stake big time because there's more marginal shops than really, really good ones out there. And that's where the newspaper people and the TV journalists go out and do their stings. That's where people go in and they try to name their price because we're not earning the kind of money that we should be. And we need to be paid for what we know, not for what we do.
Yeah, aren't we due for a sting here? It's usually like it's very like every 2-3
Every
years.
spring.
Usually,
Yeah.
we're usually due for some rip-off mechanic. Wanted to charge $1,400. It was a blown fuse. Our crack team of news professionals that have no automotive knowledge are going to dictate how this story goes.
Yep,
it's amazing, right?
Yeah, even the ones that really get me are the ones where they disable the car somehow, unplug a sensor or cut a wire. It's fairly obvious, and they bring it to however many different shops. We only know what we see on the screen, but shop A runs the codes, finds out the mass airflow sensor's unplugged. They plug it in and shake their hand and say, "Have a nice day." And that's the honest shop.
No,
they're good. They're 5-star. Shop B does the same thing, but charges them whatever, $50, $100. They were not dishonest. They didn't break the car. It took money, cost to go look at the vehicle, drive it in, hook up a scan tool that's not free, all that. So they charge a price, yet they're not viewed as being honest and fair. And then, of course, you got then there's the half a dozen of ones where you need a new mass airflow sensor. They didn't put it on. They just plugged it in, and you need to just clean the mass airflow sensor. And what it's here needs a transmission fluid flush and a fuel system service and tire rotation and all that.
Yes.
Those are the ones that get me, where they throw the shop that's honest and charges an honest fee for their services are frowned on as being dishonest. That gets me.
Agreed. We should expound a little bit on that, though, Matt.
Oh yeah.
Because what you've just brought up is a scenario that I say all the time. I said where we went wrong as an industry was like 1983, 1984. All right, where Mrs. Jones would pull up in her Buick LeSabre and it was chugging and choking out and stalling. And remember the old, LeSabre hoods that you had to open up forward then backwards, And we went out there, and while it was running all, janky and everything, we beat on the airflow meter and it straightened right up, and we thought we were hot shit, doing that, and and everything else. Right there was an opportunity where we lost it right there back in 1983, 1984. If we were any type of professional industry, we would have said, Mrs. Jones, we need to bring your car in. We need to evaluate it. We need to do some testing. We need to do some pin testing. It's going to be X amount of dollars. It's going to be X amount of dollars for the airflow meter. It's going to be X amount of dollars for the labor of the airflow. How many shops put in bulbs where it takes them an hour and a half to change a bulb and don't charge any additional labor? These are all things that, when I got my knee done, I had knee surgery. The guy wasn't like, while I'm in there, I'll do this for free.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a different type of thing. It's something that we missed the opportunity back in 1983, 1984 to really make our mark when computers were starting to become mainstream on cars and the technology really ramped up. We really missed an opportunity right there to become a professional, united industry, and
Yeah.
we missed it.
See, and I got trained in on, like, I had the big box analyzers in school, but I never worked for a shop that had, the big Sun machine or the big Bear machine or the big SCA Allen machine. I'm thinking, like, when those were there and they weren't necessarily dealing with electronic, fuel injection or even electronic ignition, the shops had to drop a fair bit of money for these things. I'm thinking they're in that $20,000 to $30,000 range.
Yeah, 20G for an SEA.
Okay, so this car comes in, they hook that up. Was there a fee associated with that because we had to use the big machine that we're going to charge you $50, $100, whatever it was at the time, to analyze the vehicle? And if it was some of the Sun machines would print out the complete report or whatever and look really fancy. Were we charging for that? And then when we kind of made the shift to handhelds, the Snap-on scanner, the OTC 4000, 4000 enhanced, MasterTech maybe, was that when we started not charging so much, even though that these scan tools were a couple grand plus 500 to $1,000 a year to update? Is that when we started not charging? Like, oh, I'll just plug it in, it's got a code, or like you said, walk out, smack the mass airflow sensor, get the long pry bar, open up the glove box, pop the ECM a couple times, it dies. Is that really where it started too? Is like we were charging because we had this big investment we had to pay for, and there was some value because the customer could look at that and say, "Oh my God, that's humongous. That must be really expensive. You're gonna hook that up with my car? That's gonna tell me what's wrong with my car? Okay."
Yeah, well, I always charge, so I never had a problem.
You don't know the wrong person to ask.
To me, that was an investment. I had an Allen SEA, and I think back when we had it, I bought it in like 85, 86. And I think to do a full thing on that back then, I think I was charging $89.95.
Yeah. And that thing did vacuum testing really well.
Yes, it did in-cylinder vacuum, where you could print it out and everything else. But the one bad thing about it was every car had a primary ignition issue. Every car. I don't think I ever ran a car that never had a primary ignition issue on an SCA. So, but you bring up a good point that, when did we stop charging, or when did the waters become muddy?
Yeah.
John, you may be the exception to the rule, but I'll bet you, and again, I don't know. I'd love to ask some legacy guys that have gray hair if they did or didn't charge. And if they didn't, then they never changed their ways, and they kept buying more and more expensive equipment, everything that has to do with training and the investment that we made. I think we should stop, get a yellow pad out, and write down everything we invest in the knowledge side of our business and look at that, divide it by the number of hours we're billing every year, and realize that we're investing X per hour. And so we have to charge. We have to charge. And if we don't, we're going to have the shops that are always living on the edge and are always shortcutting and are making bad reputation for our industry.
Agreed.
Yeah, they're playing a very short game. It's short-term gain of maybe winning a customer, winning their affections, winning a 5-star review, but it's unsustainable. You can't keep it up. And you're also pulling everyone else down, because now the shop that is charging, whatever it is, it's a problem vehicle. It's been to multiple shops. I'm taking $500 before I even look at it. That's something that Paul Danner's pushing pretty hard. He's kind of onto something. But we're making them look like the crooks rather than reversing it a little bit and saying, well, no, we're not crooks. That's essentially a lost leader over there. And I'm not sure where they're. Oh, sorry.
It's a race to the bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like they're unwittingly standing on the gas. Like, it's very frustrating.
Guys, I got to tell you a quick story about a shop owner that I talked to at Vision who was very close to buying his third shop. So close to the fact that the papers were just about ready to be signed, but before they signed them, they wanted to interview the team of the shop they were buying. They interviewed everyone, and at the end of the interviews, they didn't buy the business because it wouldn't have conformed to their purpose and their why of their company. And they felt that the day they bought that facility, within 2 weeks, they would have had to fire all the people. They just weren't of decent quality. They wanted the location and the shop really bad, but they felt that if they bought it and let people go, the reputation of the new ownership for not knowing really where the kind of quality that they were going to bring to this market in this location would have hurt them very badly. So I tell that story because I think there's some value. If you want to sell your place, you not only have to have a good profit, people want to buy the cash, they also need to buy the reputation and the people.
Something that it seems like we're bouncing around, and John took the words out of my mouth, is professionalism. Like when you say to someone, name a professional or a professional service, is auto repair at the top of that list? Or do you think attorney, doctor, accountant? And we have an image problem.
So we need to get ties.
Yeah. Have you seen the Mercedes logo under the hood that shows you the tie? You're not supposed to get stuck in the cooling fan, but it's an image thing. And I think that's where I was going with the previous interjection I had about, we condone behavior that's unprofessional. And I'm not minimalizing people with substance abuse disorders. It's a real issue and it affects everyone, but we have an image problem, and people don't view automotive professionals as professionals. And it all revolves around, the value in what we do. Oh, you're going to hook your computer up to it and tell me what's wrong. Actually, Mr. Customer, the computers, it's really not that way. I pull a code and it gives me some diagnostic direction. I then have to perform testing and analysis to determine the actual root cause of your issue. When you say it that way, it sounds like they're getting a professional service. But if you're like, hey, let's just get the code readouts and the computer's going to tell me what's wrong, it devalues. It doesn't sound professional, and it hurts all of us. It ruins or tarnishes our image as a profession.
So I would like to know, does the sun set in Minneapolis really bad, heavy? Do you see how dark, Matt?
I've been just slowly turning the dimmer.
I can't believe it, Matt. It's so dark.
Achingly slow.
In another minute, you will be completely in the dark.
He's
I've
using
been
an
in the dark
automotive
for
term.
a long time.
He's using an automotive term. He's sundowning himself.
Yes. There's a sunset clause here, and I'm invoking it.
Hey guys, Zach, thank you for bringing up the word professional. I really listen. We've done 130 weeks of shop tours in the Aftermarket Weekly show that we do. I mean, you see some gorgeous, beautiful, nice shops. You even see some really good, that they may not be slick, but they're professional. The culture's right. The environment inside works. And when customers go there, they're not going to argue about how much, because it's the feeling that they leave with. We don't work on cars. We work on people. We go for safety and reliability in what we do for people's vehicles. And if they learn to trust us, so yeah, there's a reputation that sits over here, but I also think there's this other really great group of professionals, Zach, that's working so hard to change the industry.
I agree. I agree.
So thank you for bringing that up. I'm with you. I'm 100%. Thank you for. I think this episode, we need to come up to some kind of conclusion, and that is, let's work our butt off for the profession that we are to do everything that we can to change our reputation. And I think the more we talk to the shops, and listen, guys, you're mobile techs, so you're helping the guys that don't have an A tech inside. And God bless you. Let's sum this thing up. I want to ask each of you, what's the future of the mobile business? John, Sean, and then Zach. John, your opinion.
The future of the mobile business, in my estimation, it will probably keep evolving. I don't think it will ever go away, but I do believe that the future of the mobile business will probably be reduced, given the advent and of over the air updates to modules that the OEs have been, knocking on a door with. But I think you're still going to need somebody to go in there and diagnose cars, whether it be, a 1984 Buick Century or a, 2044, whatever, General Motors EV. You're still going to need somebody in there that has some product knowledge, has some critical thinking skills, and is able to diagnose and or program. So I don't, to be quite honest with you, Carm, I don't think that the future of the mobile business is as bright as it was 10 years ago, because I think it's on the downward side of the bell curve, to tell you the truth. But there's still a lot of value there.
John, do you think you'll ever be brick and mortar?
No.
Okay. Straight up answer. Sean, what's your thinking on that?
I would agree with John. I think one thing about mobile techs is that they can overcome and adapt. So I think, and they pivot. So I think with the new problems and challenges, they will adapt and they'll pivot around it and they'll figure it out. The technology is going to be very interesting on how that's going to happen with VR glasses and goggles and things like that. And as John said, over the air. But I think, and I agree with him, that there is always going to be a need for it. It just might be different than what we see today, for sure.
Interesting. Zach, how about you?
Like John said, it's definitely on the downward trend. I got on this train way late. I mean, I'm a young guy, and I just started mobile full time a little over a year and a half ago. I think we're going to stop seeing a lot of the programming type jobs where I go in, I flash a PCM, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot more heavily diag oriented services, but also used components. And the thing about used components, people are keeping their vehicles longer. Vehicles are no longer being supported as they age. How are you going to get a PCM? I just did a wireless control module on a 2010 Avenger this past week, and it was easier to get a used component than a new one, but it required a lot more in-depth knowledge to repair. Another big problem is with sundowning. Since we mentioned Matt was getting sundowned, SPS 1 is dead. It's completely dead. So no more awesome legacy GM programming. I couldn't program a module for a 2008 GMC Sierra. I ended up swapping an entire MCU chip. So I think us mobile guys are probably going to move away from the software side, and we're going to get more heavily involved in hardware and EEPROM and electronics. So,
Matt, what's your thought of what these guys said?
I mean, I'm torn because I see some of the mobile techs that are very successful as mobile techs because of ADAS had to get like a brick and mortar type of place, whether it was storage facility type shed, if you will, something to set up targets, maybe even an alignment machine, depending on car lines they're servicing, stuff like that. And it eventually starts evolving into all of a sudden they have a full-blown brick and mortar shop. And I also see how, manufacturer driven over the air updates and or just more and more supply tool providers are giving alternate means of handling these situations, both programming and some to a degree diagnostics. I don't think it replaces somebody there that knows what they're doing and can come up with that plan with the vehicle there, right? There's something to be said, not to go back, like talking a little bit about ASE, but we all know that tech that is a brilliant tech, brilliant. They have a rough time with the ASE tests, but when they're looking at not the broken question, but the question about the broken situation, they struggle because they can't use their sense of smell and sight, feeling, and all that, touch. They rely on we still need that with the mobile techs at the shops, and they're usually on that cutting edge, right? Because they've had to be. Right. It started out programming. Or maybe a lot of them started out diagnostics, but then it got programming, and then it got to be ADOS, and then it got to be R1234YF, and then it got to be board level repairs and maybe locksmith type stuff. That's the nature of mobile right now.
So let me just throw this crazy thought I have going through my head. Guys, I so respect you have your own business and you love what you do. But someday, would someone that has brick and mortar who's looking for their top diagnostic guy, person, lady, just make you such an offer that you say, I don't care about the government tax forms. I don't care about workman's comp anymore. I'm just going to go to work for somebody and earn a lot of money and bring my talent to a shop. Possible? No, because you only could work for you, right, John?
I wouldn't want to work for me.
Okay, I get it. I understand. Yeah, I get it. Sean, how about you? Anybody entice you to go to work for?
Yeah, I think it will depend on the situation and where you are in your life. It would be hard to go back to working for someone else, but at the same time, I can also see I know some friends that are getting close to retirement, and they went that their route. They're going to finish off their last couple of years working for someone. So I guess it all kind of depends on where you are in your life. But yeah, that's a hard one to go back to working for someone.
Yeah. Interesting. And Zach, you're college bound. You're going to make that flying car for me, and so you may be just a little far away from my question. Would you ever go to work for somebody as a top level 6-figure diagnostic tech?
You know, again, it's gonna vary a lot based on situation, but I think I keep going back to the symptom problem thing. I think mobile might be a symptom of our industry, and guys that weren't happy in a shop, they were created, or that environment created mobile. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate mail like, oh, you're just trashing on the industry. I'm not. Okay. There's a bunch of amazing shops out there. However, a lot of the mobile guys, I think we are probably jaded. We came from those shop environments, are like, I'm done. You threw your hands up and you walked out. So remove me from the scenario I'm currently in, where I've got 1 foot in the industry, 1 foot out. Yeah, I think you could attract mobile talent, but we are going to open a giant can of worms with pay plan. We're going to play flat rate or hourly salary. There's a whole can of worms to be opened, but I think it's possible.
Everybody that I talk to, Matt, and they just don't pay flat rate to diag people. They just don't.
Yeah. And he's right with the symptoms. It's symptomatic, but 2 different ways. One is, of course, the people that are going mobile wanted to do more of whatever that was. They wanted to do more diagnostics, more drivability. Maybe found out there's way more money in programming, which is kind of funny, right? Shop owners complaining about there's no money in diag. I'd rather have guys hanging brakes. And then there's a mobile guy shows up and it's like, there's no money in diag. I just want to program or do ADOS. That's where the money's at. I think that's funny. And then also the nature of needing the mobile guy or mobile tech. We need them because, or certain shops specifically, because of either lack of competency. And I don't mean that like they're a bunch of morons. I just mean lack of competency on that particular issue or car line, and ill-equipped for it. They don't want to pay the money for the training and the tooling to do it. So it's a sublet, right? Just, I don't have a boring bar and, a bunch of machining equipment to do, head resurfacing. I sublet it. If we had a mobile machine shop, maybe we'd do that. Well, this is what we're seeing with the mobile tech. I don't have the need or desire yet to invest in this piece of equipment to work on this car line. I'm gonna have John come and do it. I'm gonna have Zach come in and do it. Have Sean come do it. And maybe someday I get to the point where it's like, man, we're subletting a lot to John. We're just gonna go buy a tool, and then we'll burn the car down and burn the module down and bring you in anyways.
Yeah, I've had that come full circle where I've had shops that, early on when I first started. You know, they were calling me in for everything, and then they tooled up. And some of them I've actually helped them, you know, tooled up, gave them some training and everything else. And some shops have taken that and gone, you know, ran with it and have become quite successful doing it. And, you know, I hardly ever hear from them. You know, every once in a while I'll hear from them on something. And then I have the other shops that decided that they were going to do it, got their foot wet, you know, in it, and said, you know, there's a lot of sharks in this water. I'm out, you know, and had me come back in. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's definitely, it depends on, again, the shop, the atmosphere, the personnel, the environment, and everything else.
Guys, great discussion. Thank you for bringing up some of these great terms, being, you know, the profession that we're in. And you're right. I think we're evolving. And I just love the discussion. And in fact, Matt, I'm sorry, but I promised I would stay in the background. But since the discussion was so good, I threw myself in the ring.
I think we're better for it.
You're so kind. Guys, anytime, come back, come on Matt's show, come back here. We could, I mean, because the discussion could go on and on and on. And I got about 30 questions I still want to ask you guys. So maybe we'll have to do another round too. Thank you so much, Matt Fanslow, John Rogers, Sean Hill, and Zack McClain for being on the Town Hall Academy. Guys, have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Carl.